Okay, that's good stuff. Thanks, guys. Matt, would you like to repeat everything you just said?
Okay, sure. Um, yeah, so before quarantine, I just played in a local group. Just some like household games, nothing competitive.
Hmm.
Um, Once quarantine hit, I saw like the first Command Point Invitational go up, and I'd wanted to join it, but I was just like a little nervous, I guess. I never signed up and took the leap. Um, but once BAO came around, I joined that one. Um, since then, I've been playing in all of the online majors. I've won some, placed highly in most of them, and now we're looking into Kill Team 2, and
Yeah.
we just had our first online tournament. It was just a small one on the Killzone Discord.
Yep.
And yeah, I managed to win my pod there.
Cool.
And
Cool.
so yeah, Kill Team.
That
Kill
was
Team
the
2 is looking
one
good too.
that I saw. I didn't get to see it because obviously I was away. But that was the one that Barricades was streaming live the whole day. Was he? Was that his thing? Or was that a different one?
Right. So sorry. So that's a different one. That's
Oh, okay.
the one I'm talking about happened 2 weeks ago. That one happened yesterday.
Okay.
Mhm.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you're here because obviously nobody heard your first bit there. You're here because you're generally considered to be arguably like the best player on TTS. You know, that's how I hear your name thrown
Pretty
around.
arguably.
Well, that's what people say. That's what people say. I mean, maybe there were like a handful of you up there that are like the best of the TTS crowd. And you're definitely one of them that's mentioned. So we kind of got you on because obviously when you're a good player, people tend to listen to and respect the things that you say, because presumably you have the knowledge, because that's why you're winning games. So what better way to kind of dive into the game than take someone that's already grinded out like 50 games or something crazy, and say, hey, what do you think of stuff? At some point, we are going to discuss the new ad mech, the Hunter Clade. But for the moment, hold on. At the start of the Vantage Point podcast, I have to say the Vantage Point spiel. All right, I'm not very good at this. Okay. Welcome to Vantage Point, the place for me, glass half dead, to talk about the subjects I want to talk about without having to care about my YouTube channel analytics. So expect some heavy rambling content as I turn the conceal order on what I want to talk about to an engage order. Right, there you go.
I like that. Well done.
Thank you. I came up with that on the fly. That was good.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so now that I've got that introduction out of the way, like 10 minutes into the discussion, I don't know, like Kill Team 2, which is no longer Kill Team 2, it's Kill Team. You know, we've got to move on from that. Obviously, anybody watching this knows, but I think it can get a bit confusing for new players if we could keep calling things Kill Team 2, but Kill Team 2 never appears anywhere on any paper, you know?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, I don't know, what do you think? Okay, let's you know what? So there's just been a bunch of tournaments in real life, and Custodes are winning everything. What's your take on Custodes? Let's just start there.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think something needs to be done about them. Like, I played against them. I had to beat a Custodes player in my pod. But I've also like I've got a practice partner. He kind of lives in town here with me.
Oh, cool.
And he's a great player. You might have seen him around some of the Discords. Fox. He works on a lot of like the TTS stuff.
Oh yes, I know. Well, I know the name.
Yeah, he's like my main practice partner. So he's run some Custodes games against me, and like for the life of me, I cannot figure out how to beat the 4 Custodes team.
So you think they're better than two Custodes, 5 sisters? Cool, nice.
Yeah, I think they're much better.
Yeah.
I think right now we're still at like a weird spot where like people we'll see some Custodes players like lose games, or they'll point at a tournament and be like, look, this guy like lost like 3 matches or something.
Yeah.
But I think whenever you look at like a good player or like a very competent player playing Custodes, it is extremely one-sided. Like I think we just got some information about like Janice kind of like running the gauntlet on a tournament with them.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as you get a player like that behind them, like it's pretty much unstoppable at this point.
Sure. So I think one of the things that people are saying is that, you know, we're all in this really, I just pressed a button, I hope it didn't like cancel the recording or something. No, we're still here. Okay. So I think something, you know, we're in this weird, there's such a huge disparity in power levels, if we want to be anime about it, where some people are completely new and they don't get what a concealed order does, right? So you might have them as a Custode player go in and just get shot off the board because they just didn't, you know, they thought, oh, I've got 18 wounds and a 2-up save, I'm fine. And they get taken out because, you know. But likewise, we probably have that same kind of person. It depends who they're facing. If that person is facing another new player, then actually, because the Custodes are so durable, they might be able to play that way. And that's kind of the benefit of the Custode. Then we kind of get that middle ground where people are like, okay, I can't do that. And so you kind of get into this dip where you get a little bit better. And I think that's probably where, let's say, most of the Custode players that are topping tournaments probably are. I would say. Right. But of course, they're not playing. I don't know. This feels almost rude to say it, and obviously, who knows who they are playing. But they're not playing someone that's played 50, 60 games already. They're playing someone that's played 10, 20, right? Which is quite a significant difference. And so my hope had been that once everybody is perhaps where you are now, we'd kind of see that, like, right, no, actually, yes, Custodes are really bad there, but once you're through, once you're at the 50 game limit, you see how to counter them. You see that, you know, you see, yes, they're durable, but you know, the common phrase that everybody says is, "There's only 4 of them. You can outplay them, etc." And you're kind of saying, "Nah."
No, so I think we're going to see like a bit of an evolution in what Custodes players are going to be doing. I think right now they're being very aggressive turn 1. They'll usually have like at least 2 of like the spear guys kind of like sitting on the back, really trying to like impact the enemy's model count like immediately. But I think we're gonna see a shift in like the better players to being for the Custodes playing like more conservative round 1, because I think if you just like if round 1 is a wash and nothing happens, I think that really favors the Custodes player, because the other guy is on a clock for like how much damage he can do to those kinds of models. If the Custodes player like just goes conceal, takes some points turn 1, moves up the board, and then it's just like, okay, let's start from turn 2 on. Most teams at that point aren't going to have, like, assuming they even like can get their shots off and can get their models where they need to be, most teams aren't going to be able to kill enough of them at that point to make any progress on the board.
Okay. And we're generally saying that... So the other thing you then hear is, we'll just outplay them. Ignore them.
Right.
Essentially ignore them. But
yeah.
I think that's bad advice. For my limited noob view, I think when they Brotherhood of Demigods and they Peerless Warrior, you cannot ignore them. They are killing, what, 2 models a turn each? Probably.
And I think that's kind of like leftover advice from Kill Team 1, right? Where you could take like a high model count team and just be like, I'm going to play the objective game, feed them a model a turn, and they're going to kill a model. I'm still going to hold more than them by the end of the game. But now, like with the way APL's used to like hold points, if those Custodes models are just like mid-board on objectives, and you have to put 3 of your own models on an objective to hold it, like how do you score while ignoring them?
Right.
Like you have to be in the same spot, right? It just doesn't work like that. And then as you were mentioning with Brotherhood of Demigods. I feel like it's kind of akin to reserve play from Kill Team 1, where, yeah, like at the end of a turn in Kill Team 1, some teams could just like drop models like anywhere they wanted. And we were finding that on open board, that was just like almost the defining factor of what would make a team like competitive at the top level.
Right, sure.
And it feels like Demigods is kind of doing the same thing. It's just like these crazy models can be anywhere at any point in any turn, and that makes it incredibly hard to position around.
Okay. So do you think there is like let's take it from the other side then. So Custodes very strong at all levels of play. You know, and for possibly for different reasons, at the different levels. How do you think they could be fixed? If you had to go rules designer for a moment, what would you do?
All right, I think so I've seen a few ideas around there. The two main ones I've seen floated are either do Custodes are 1 per fire team, or 1 per fire team plus a leader.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And so the main difference between that, like they would, or sorry, it was 1 per fire team plus a leader.
Yeah.
If you don't take any sisters.
Yeah. So it would be 1 if you take 1, and if you not as a leader. But then if you go all Custodes, you take 3 basically instead of 4.
Right.
Or and you take 2 and the sisters.
Right. I think like I think 1 plus sisters.
Okay.
Probably isn't enough for.
That sounds weak. Yeah. But
yeah, exactly. I found the sisters teams are like beatable as is.
Yeah.
But very, very tough.
Okay.
So I'm kind of two minds right now. I think either you have to go the 1 plus leader, so that a sisters team can take 2 Custodes, or a Custodes team can take 3. And change demigods so that it's maybe a free action, but it counts as like within the model's activation. So like no double moves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, double move, triple shoot, all that crazy thing.
Right. I don't even like mind the shoot stuff as much. Like it's mostly the moves and like charges outside of activation that I think pushes that over the edge.
Yeah. Okay.
Or cut it down to the 3 and 1 and leave demigods as is. But I don't like that as much because I think demigods just isn't fun to play against as is.
It kind of allows the Custodian to do literally anything they want.
Almost. Yeah, like I think we want to push the game towards an area where players can like differentiate the results based on their skill, right? Sure. And your execution is going to come down to your positioning with your team on the board. And when the other guy can just kind of negate any positioning you do that easily, I think it makes it really hard to outskill your opponent, if that makes sense.
If you want to talk about positioning, I mean, you say that's an issue for them. Would you say that extends to Harlequins as well? With their just completely bonkers flip belts? Or is that not so much an issue for you?
I mean, Harlequins are super strong. I think they have... Their positioning isn't quite as insane, though, because, like, you can still measure. Like, you can look at a Harlequin and be like, well, it's still got an 8-inch charge. It can do a single move and a single dash. It ignores terrain. But I think Harlequins also have a lot more downsides than the Custodes have, like ways they can be exploited. So I don't think it's as much of an issue. Right now I see Harlequins as like a really strong... They're actually like a little similar to how they were in Kill Team 1, where they're really strong in certain matchups. And they're going to really struggle in others, I feel. I think like anybody with access to like good cheap grenades, it's going to do really well against Harlequins. Like all else being equal. Like obviously a good player will make the most of what they have, but...
So if we had to play around with a few ideas there, I think a common one might be to, if you take not Brotherhood, Peerless Warrior, So you actually don't mind that they can fight and shoot twice? Like, you wouldn't really attack that as a strat? Like,
Right.
you can either, pick. You can either have all your guys, or individually, each custode can either fight twice or shoot twice for the 1 CP. You don't really care?
No, I don't care.
Okay.
I think, like, once you can lock down their movement a bit, if we can do that, by nerfing demigods,
right. Then the fight
can be able to fight as much and shoot as much as you provide them targets for that, right?
Sure. Okay.
And so, as the other player, that's in my control. Like, he can only fight twice if I let him charge 2 models. Yeah. He can only shoot twice if I position my models in a way that he can do that. Okay. So I can play around that, but I can't play around
yeah.
warping custodes, you know?
What if Brotherhood was 2 APL, or it was once a game, but still APL, sorry. If it was 2 CP, or it was once a game, but still 1 CP. Like, thoughts?
Yeah, that's a neat one. I haven't seen that floated before. I
mean, you're just looking at ways of limiting them doing things that break the game, right?
Yeah.
Because right now there are too many auto picks for ploys, it seems.
Right. No, I like that. Either of those would be fine.
Okay.
I think I still prefer, like, limiting the movement aspect of it. Right. Because, like, even once per game, like a custody just appearing in your back line round 2.
Yeah.
Lots of teams can't deal with that. Like, lots of teams are going to have, like, maybe 1-2 models that can, like, actually damage that kind of, like, chassis.
Yeah, sure.
And so if he's able to use demigods to just shut those particular models down, even on 1 turn, that can be the end of the game.
Sure. Okay.
For some teams.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. I'm just throwing out ideas because obviously at the Bad Moon tournament I went to last week, Custodes won. But very much a beginner tournament. But then the Warhammer World yesterday, they won and they came 3rd. And then in Spain, they just did one today and they won. Yep. I was like, I think they won and they came 2nd as well in Spain. Right. So, we are definitely seeing a bit of a pattern. Hard to tell. But again, first, it's still the first month. Like, Killteam's been out less than a month. I think it released on the 26th or something. So it hasn't been a month. That's why I'm partly kind of hoping that this is all beginner stuff, but as you're saying, no, it's not.
Yeah, I think demigods gives custodies, like, so much agency that a good player is going to be able to use that agency in, like the skill cap increases on the custody side pretty significantly.
Awesome.
Like, a player just using demigods really sharply is going to be just nasty.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So let's quickly go over to the chat because I'm terrible at this. So chat, the very first thing they said, like half an hour ago now, Bad Mode asked, how was the tournament? That's to me, obviously. Warhammer World. Yeah, I'll give a quick review about Warhammer World.
Yeah, please.
Actually, quickly, Killteam Stream said, what about Custodes going to 3 APL? As a balancing factor.
It's okay. I don't like it as much, though. I think
fair enough.
It makes them make a little bit of a choice between. I think at 4 APL, they're, like, super dominant on missions where there's mission actions.
Yeah.
It lets them just do everything they want to do while doing the missions.
Yeah.
Bumping them down to 3 helps with those kinds of missions. I think it still doesn't do a ton to limit them.
Okay.
On, like, just, like, the normal, like, controlling objectives kind of style. And it doesn't solve any of the movement shenanigans, really.
Right, sure. Oh, yeah, because, of course, Brotherhood, it gives them just 4 APL, double act. Yeah, cool. Okay, fair enough. So, the other question was the Warhammer World Tournament. So I went. For those of you that haven't been to Warhammer World, it was a. If you haven't been, it's really nice. Like I think the venue is genuinely probably one of the best places I've ever played, just because it's very thematic. You know, like I went to SoCal and I went to LVO, and inevitably I was in a warehouse or I was in a hotel room. That was the theme, and it was fine. You know, it was like a conference center in a hotel room. You know, but this is like the walls are like, you know, old brick, and there's you know, like it's a castle. And there's like Bugman's Bar where it's all wood and basically just looks like a normal British pub, but there's like an axe sitting somewhere in a demon's head and all this cool stuff. And then of course you've got something that I really like, which is the store, because obviously there's the Forge World store, obviously, where you can see all of the Forge World models built and put out for you. And then you've also got the main store, which is just a standard GW store, but the thing that they do there is they have every single model, or I think it's very close to every single model, just out on display in just grey plastic. So you can just see what every model actually looks like, built, and yeah, I think that's really cool. And then of course there's the exhibition, where that's pretty fun too. I've been before, but like 3 years ago, and I actually didn't have time this time, but I was fine with it. You know, they just have all of these awesome dioramas and amazingly painted models, and I think the star of the show now is there's this huge table. I don't even know how big it is. Let's just say like 5 by 6 meters, like huge. And you walk into the room and you're at the top of this huge, and there's this huge spire, and like the little walkway takes you around it, and you go downstairs, and there's a little plaque at the beginning of the room that says, there is an Evasaur assassin on this table. If you spot it, you win, like something. And I believe nobody's spotted it, right? Like ever in 3 years. So it's somewhere on there. That's pretty cool. Also, so you know, that's like the venue, which is really nice. Obviously, the staff are cool. I think they are just. You know how people make fun of GW staff for being really aggressive when you walk in the store and are like, do you need help? You know, I think that's really just bad. But like it's applied to the tournament staff as well. Like they come out and they're just happy, and they're like, oh, this is really fun, isn't it? And they definitely managed to keep that facade going for quite a while. That's for sure. And yeah, it was just a good event. And this year it was COVID safe, which means that every table we played on was a big 6x4 table for 40k. But obviously there was only the small kill team board on, and I've got to say, it's really nice. It's really nice to play on such a big table, because at Bad Moon, sadly, you know, we had two boards to a table, to a 40k table, which means that you're struggling for room. I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
You know, that's when you need your data cards printed out. Don't forget to get your data cards from Glass Half Dead Patreon. No. But that's when you need it out, because you don't have the space to have 2 rulebooks sat out, right? You can't check your core book and your compendium, and like you need your information right there. But not an issue here. So, and all of the terrain was lovely. So I actually did a little video about, I'm a little bit scared about the terrain they're going to do, because when we last went there, like for the last one they did for Kill Team was an arena event. Man, the terrain sucked. Like obviously they used arena terrain, but they hadn't painted it. They just glued it together, and it's like, this is GW. And they're giving us unpainted terrain. It's their terrain. Like, yeah, that was bad. But whatever.
I saw a few pictures from that event. I think you had posted of the boards. What was your take on them from like a gameplay perspective? It looked like a good amount of terrain, but maybe fewer vantage points than we're used to.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, so the thing they had done is, you know, in Octarius there are 4 buildings and an oil rig, right?
Yeah.
So in this there were 2 buildings and an oil rig, and then for the other 2 buildings they just didn't put the floors in, so they were just walls. So on
Okay.
every board there were only 3 vantage points. Yeah, which was interesting, definitely. Like I think it played quite well. If I'm honest, it's from a vantage point perspective, it definitely made vantage points weren't a huge thing in at least in my games. I mean, there was a commando that deployed a commando player that just deployed the sniper boy on a vantage point
Right.
immediately with the strat deploy. I was like, okay, well, this is now a thing in the game. And then there was a sisters player who managed to, be the defender and pick the vantage the deployment zone with the vantage point. That's the name of the podcast. With the vantage point in his deployment zone, and that won him the game, undoubtedly. But outside of those 2 instances, there wasn't vantage points didn't really have a huge effect. Which
And how did you find that affected? Like, sorry, I don't even know what did you take to that tournament?
Grey Knights.
Grey Knights. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Because I did Grey Knights at Bad Moon and came second, and then I did Grey Knights here and came 37th. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It went well. It went pretty
Everybody
well.
has those days.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel like
Yeah.
Do you think a shooting team could like still perform well against like a predominantly melee team on a board that doesn't have access to those?
So, okay, I played terribly this entire day, except for the first game, where I believe I genuinely performed quite well. I was against Harlequins, and I was against Wes, who is a playtester. And I really struggled because I just couldn't get onto objectives without knowing he was going to come and get me. Like there was, So I genuinely struggled, and after that game, I was like, I felt like it was too dense. Did I even have? So I did have a vantage point in my that I could have gotten onto, but with Harlequins, Domino Field.
Yeah, exactly.
So and the board was too dense, so I didn't even consider it. The next game I played sisters, it was just 2 sisters, so they're entirely shooting. And yeah, I don't know, I just messed that up. The next game was Death Guard, who obviously have much slower movement, and oddly never managed to get into melee with me despite having a cleaver. And then the final game, Commandos. Yeah, I don't know. I think I hate to say that the boards were too dense, but they almost were. But I think it's such a fine point, and I also think you have to ignore Harlequins when you're thinking about this, because they do just break. It's similar to Custodians. They almost break a fundamental of the game. But let's ignore them. Let's think Tyranids. I think even if it had been Tyranids who can't fly, it would have been really tough for me. I think Grey Knights actually have an okay pairing into Gene Stealers, but ultimately I probably would have won that just off attrition. I think a savvy Gene Stealer player could just hide and then take out the Grey Knights there.
Yeah, this has given me some interesting ideas. It kind of feels like, from what you've described, we could look at just kind of undensifying some of these boards in general. As long as we dial back the vantage points as well.
Sure. Okay.
So it would have the effect of putting less emphasis on the vantage points, and it actually dials back the strength of like always concealed models a bit, because there's less terrain, right?
Yeah.
So it makes it harder to be always concealed, but it also makes it harder for shooting teams to ignore the ground level terrain, right?
Right, sure.
So that might be something interesting to play around with.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how we'd go around really. I mean, obviously you can play a few games and get a gut feeling, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, more so than ever, I think this is an edition where terrain defines the best teams, apart from
Right.
possibly custodians. Ignore that. But like, like, you know, if you've got too much terrain on the board, the melee teams are going to dominate. If you don't have enough, the shooting teams are going to dominate. And
it's
very fine balance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, I guarantee you, if you try to play with basically the boards as they were there, but take away one or two of the light barricades, you'd have you'd have Barricades saying, "This game is broken. I can't believe they would do this. My gene stealers are dying." But you know, you do it the other way. Then you'd say it's a great game, I guess.
Yeah. You're never gonna get everybody happy.
No, of course. But
I really I think Emmanuel and Alex way back, they used to talk about like a good board was a board where neither player is completely happy with it.
I think that's a nice way to view it. Yeah, nobody should like the game. You should always be complaining.
Exactly. That's all self-predictive.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I do think that's a good point, but I suppose also we have more of an emphasis on, because of course last edition we were going symmetrical, weren't we? Whereas now, very clearly asymmetrical. But also the way we choose it is, I think, quite different this game. And so yeah, I don't know what I'm saying with that, but I said it, so that's enough.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, just the degree to which that like asymmetricality comes into play can have such a defining factor on everything in the game.
My current leaning. Yeah, no, carry on. Yeah,
there's just like everybody has a different opinion on like how asymmetrical they should be, from like just like one piece moved like a little bit to two vantage points, the other side has one. Like there's the entire range in there, right?
No,
your opinion on that?
Man, my opinion is that these boards were laid out in conjunction with the designer of the game. I would consider what they've done there to be the default, and I would consider that to be, they probably know better than us. And for us to come out, and I mean, they've been doing this for like a year and a half, right? They have access to all of the GW terrain. They've sat down and they've said, these are the ones that we're going to put on the board. And so I would assume some level of testing went into it, right? But let's say we don't have exactly what they had there. I think the way you should be setting up a board is very deliberately asymmetrical, but it should be more about lanes. It shouldn't be, you know, you want one side to be quite built up and one side to be quite sparse. And then ideally you want that different. So this is, you can't really do this in a tournament, but ideally you can on TTS. You want every deployment to have a specific terrain layout that aligns with the deployment and gives you the different ways to go, but still imbalances one side so that there is a better version. But that better version, well, an odd question, I suppose. I was just going to say the better side shouldn't always be the same for both teams, right? But because, you know, it's like, well, if I'm a melee team, I don't really care about a vantage point. But I suspect, and I kind of want to throw this your way, is you always want that vantage point in your deployment zone, right? Because even if you're not going to use it, you don't want them to have it, unless they're also a melee team, in which case that's irrelevant. But
yeah, so like you're saying, sorry, just to be clear, like, are you saying if I win the roll off, I should always be picking defender?
Oh no, I just mean if you get the choice, and you're sat down and you're trying to pick your side, what's your defining thing that you're looking for?
Yeah, so what you're saying is that if there is one side that's good for a shooting team and one side that's good for a melee team, let's just say I'm the melee team. I pick the side that's good for a melee team. I just gave the other side to the shooting team.
Yes, exactly.
Right? It's like, okay, what are we doing here?
Exactly.
No, I completely agree with what you're saying. It shouldn't be built around someone trying to make one side better for something, for like a certain play style. like the board designer shouldn't be trying to make one side favored in any respect.
Sure.
It should just be how they move relative to the board. And it shouldn't be like this one has easier access or this one has harder. It's just different.
Yeah.
Right? And so that if there is a defender, they might pick if you have the choice between defender and attacker, there should be a case that you can make for both of them.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And if you decide to be a defender, you should be able to make an argument for either side of the board.
Yes. Okay.
You shouldn't, and it should just, in the end, it should come down to like what secondaries you're picking, how your pieces, you want to move them around relative to like the objectives and what your opponent's doing. But ideally, it shouldn't be like, I have to pick this side because otherwise I'm going to get shot off the board, or I need to deny this vantage point. It should really be more balanced than that, I feel.
Now, how do we do that? Who knows? But
yeah, I think. Oh man, I'd like to see. I think you mentioned this a bit, like how hard it is to build a board that works for like every single deployment, every single mission.
I don't think you
it's
can.
Impossible, right?
No, you can't.
I kind of wonder if eventually we're gonna see like a style of tournament where you set up boards, like each table is set up for a certain mission.
Yeah. And
you're gonna rotate through the tables as you play throughout the day.
So you don't have table 1 being player 1 and 2. You have table 1, 2, 3 are all different layouts, and every turn you go to the next kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I could see that making for better games. Yeah, and I guess just circling back to another point you made, you were talking about how just like leaving, like using the stuff that GW has given us as like from Warhammer World, for example, as like a blueprint. I agree with that. I think like the best games that I've had so far have been off of like, on TTS we call it the recommended board.
Okay.
But it's just like out of core, right? I think they give those examples of like terrain. They have like that one page.
Yes.
And then at the big they have like the double page spread of like, this is a recommended kill team board.
Sure.
Someone in TTS reproduced that, and so far I found that that's been made for the funnest games.
Okay. Yeah, just off the top of my head, it's a mixture of Vertigus and some Mutatorium crates. Is that right?
I'm not good with the names.
Okay.
But yeah, there's there's some double layer stuff. There's definitely 2 crates in there. Sure. There's an oil pump, or at least like a container thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. I'm gonna throw it back to the chat because otherwise I get way behind. Azraid says hello. All I can think about is kill team, and there isn't enough content to keep me satisfied. I can listen to this all day. That's exactly why I'm doing this. I wanted to talk more kill team and not have the hassle of my YouTube algorithm. So this is, I don't know why more people aren't talking about kill team. I'm not gonna lie, but that's a whole other video. Bad motivated staff of Warhammer World will really love it. Yep, I agree. They were. Athenian, I wonder if the Talons meta is currently keeping some factions in check. Seems like I should feel fortunate that none of my friends play Talons. Interesting. Just off the top of my head, I'd probably say they're just good against everyone.
Yeah, there's... trying to think, there's been some like interesting stuff I've seen with Drukhari, not necessarily like Custodians keeping Drukhari in check.
Okay.
But there's been, I'm kind of keeping my eye on Drukhari right now. There's been some players doing some cool things with them. On the TTS tournaments, in the finals of the tournament I won, I was playing against a Drukhari player.
Okay.
And he was playing like a super aggressive style, like very heavy engage, like all plasma grenades. Mixture of like witches and Cobbleites, but I think like he only had one model concealed turn 1. And that was kind of like his MO throughout the tournament, like really heavy engaged and using his witches almost like mostly for like the pistols, and then using agile warriors to like deny melee
to
his opponent.
Interesting.
And then in this clash that happened yesterday, I wasn't able to play, but I was able to watch some of it. And it was a Drukhari player named Kellen Foster who ended up winning that one as well. And he had a very different style of Drukhari, which was really interesting.
Okay.
He was doing like much more combat drug focused, much heavier concealed, like more cagey. And he played against a Custodes player in his run as well. So I'm keeping an eye on Drukhari. It just seems like they have like a variety of play styles, and they're one of the few teams that you could argue has a game against Custodes right now, in that their shooting is just nasty. So if the Custodes missteps for a second, they can drop models in like a turn or two very easily. And then with Agile Warriors up, the possibility exists for Custodes to whiff in melee, right?
Yeah.
If
sure.
you keep rolling those 4-ups, your witches just aren't going to die, and then you can win the game. So I guess it's kind of the flip side of that. I don't feel like Custodes is keeping them in check, but I think we might see kind of like a bit of Drukhari counterplay coming up through the ranks.
Is that just because you mean that Drukhari should be the dominant one because they're so good, and Talons are the dominant one? Or
no, I feel like Drukhari is going to be, I think, where a lot of people look to try and counter Custodes without playing Custodes.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
I feel like they might end up getting overrepresented because they're going to be like the pick for like good players
because they play well into Custodes
to a tournament.
Okay,
right?
Okay. I'm with you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm with you. Because they have the potential to deny, and they don't really care that it's a. Yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
Right.
Interesting. So, to Bob Stabber, I'm still under the impression that Custodes are that fighting game character that stomps all the new players because the skill floor is very low and they're very punishing to make a mistake against. So, I think we agree on this. Yes, that's true. But the whole argument was kind of about, do they evolve out of that as people get better at the game? I think they'll always be the noob stomper because they are so durable and they are very forgiving to play. But then kind of Micro here is saying, nah. I mean, yes, but they don't stop doing that. In fact, they scale really well with the game. Yeah. So yeah. Othilian, to me, a beginner, the terrain placement in relation to objectives seems very important. I think that's a fair point, definitely. So in some of the Warhammer World terrain layouts, I can't remember the two that I actually took a picture of, but in the second ones that I'm specifically thinking of, where I played against Death Guard and then against Commandos, I was just super exposed. As soon as I stood on an objective, I was like, oh, well, I'm going to lose that model. And obviously, as a Grey Knights player, I don't really have the expendable models there. So I definitely felt the pressure of that. And I'm not really sure what to do about that. Like, I don't know if that's good or bad. It's probably better that way than the other way, of having people to just be able to say, oh, well, I'm concealed, so you can't shoot me. I don't know. I think it's a really good point. How should you place terrain around objectives? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there should be a mix. Like, let's just say, for example, there's like one objective on each side that has heavy cover on it, one objective on each side that has light cover, and one that's an open. I think that's just like, I mean, we're not talking a specific mission here, but in general, that might be a good way to approach it. It means that the more risk you're willing to take, the more you'll be rewarded for it.
Sure. Okay.
You can play safe and score like 1 point.
Yeah.
You can expose yourself a little bit for 2 points, or you can expose yourself a lot for 3.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Athenian continues, but it's a bit difficult to evaluate based on a few games because he's a beginner. All different missions you roll between IMO. With time, I guess it'll be figured out. Yeah, a quick one there. So I don't know if you're a 40k player at all, but one thing that Kill Team does is, or all of the missions are kind of completely different. I mean, they're
Right.
not completely different, but they are notably different compared to
Mhm.
the primary in 40k. It's just always hold one, hold two, hold more, much like it was with Kill Team, old Kill Team. How do you feel about that?
I'm a mix.
Okay.
I like the variety of play. I think there's some really good missions that do different things. But I think they maybe weren't curated quite enough.
Okay.
I I think like some of the missions in the core book have pretty real problems with them. From
Oh,
like at least like from a competitive point of view.
okay.
Like for example, if you take escalating hostilities and you put that in the context of like where custodies are right now.
Right.
So in this mission, there's 6 objectives, 2 kind of closer to each deployment, and then 2 in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And then each turn, one of the ones closer to your deployments disappear.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And turn 3 and 4, the ones in the middle are worth double.
Yes.
And so, like missions like that, I think have like pretty large like balance implications. Just like when you're talking about how elite teams compare to other teams on there, just like with everybody being forced into a crunch in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like that's an example of like one of the missions I think that has like some problems with it.
Okay.
It just doesn't give players much agency in how they want to approach that match, right? It's going to end in a middle scrum, right?
They have, yeah, sure, sure. Okay, no,
um,
it's a fair point.
so I think, but but on the same time, like I think one of the missions that's actually really interesting, I think it's called Secure Archaeotech.
Yeah.
It's the one where like you can pick up objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So like mission action to disengage, pick up action to pick it up, and then whoever controls those at the end of the game gets points.
Yeah.
And that's an example of a mission that is like very different from like the textbook ones that we're used to from like I guess 40k or like Kill Team 18. That I found has been like really fun and seems relatively balanced as well.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I'm kind of split on it. I like it, but I feel like they could have been a little more selective.
But I assume then, so you have an issue with some missions, but you like that they're different. Like,
Yeah,
you like that you're
yeah,
not just playing hold one, hold two, hold more every game. Awesome.
yeah. I think one of the things that let's just let's just for like the rest of this conversation, let's just pretend like Custodes doesn't exist, so that we don't have to keep
You're
making an exception
living in
for
my
them
head now. Let's do
every
it.
single
Yeah.
every single point
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
But one thing that I love about Kill Team 2 is it seems to really reward players that enter the game with like a very who have made like a consistent strategy and know how they want to approach the board and are able to like execute it. Like it you're not going to be able to do the same thing every game against every opponent. Um, and so I think it really rewards people who like are flexible. They come up with like a great idea and a great plan for the specific mission and the specific opponent and the
Mm-hmm.
specific terrain, and it's done a really good job in rewarding that. And I think these varied missions supports that as well.
Okay.
And so it's not rewarding the same kind of like net listing that you would have seen in like Kill Team 18, where it's like, well, I'm going to take 10 Novak Flayed ones every game.
Sure.
I'm going to move up and then I'm going to charge, right? It's like, well, that might work on one mission. Next mission, different opponent. That's just not going to be give you any results, right?
Sure.
So I think these varied missions kind of like, again, whenever what I really like to see in a competitive game is places where better players can differentiate their results based on their skill, and I think varied missions supports that.
Okay. Yeah, no, fair. I like it too. I was initially a bit scared,
Right.
right? in a
Me
very
too.
similar way to how secondaries in 40k scare me a bit, because it's like, oh man, I have to remember things to play this game. I can't just learn the game by rolling dice. I have to do things, and I think initially that's a little bit scary. And to see that was on the primaries as well as secondaries for this edition, I was like, ugh,
Right.
I don't know. But now I'm totally into it. I'm totally into it. It's a shame that it might be a little bit of a sticking point for some, but
Yeah.
I think it's a better game.
I do too. Yeah. It's great.
So TS Freebooter says, how about, trying to fix terrain here? Defender gets to place an extra barricade. Best practice.
Like, assuming that it's a symmetrical board and that's the only difference, I don't think it's enough.
Okay, fair enough. I haven't.
You disagree with?
No, not at all. I like the idea of the concept. Like, I think it's a good one, but it would almost be like you'd have to, from the Octarius box, one of their long pieces, like that would be good,
right?
But not just a little 2-inch barricade, kind of,
Yeah,
maybe that sort of thing, like a big verticus pipe. Yes, little barricade, as you say, probably not enough, but I'd have to really think about it. Yeah,
right.
It's an interesting idea though. Like, instead of giving the defender, decide which side because they're symmetrical, you place another piece of terrain, right? But then how far do you go? It's like, well, you say, okay, barricade's not enough, but is placing another mining rig, so you could just slam a vantage point down in your own point. It's like, well, that's probably, a game breaker, right? And just trying to figure out where in the middle you can do that. It's not a bad idea, but I think you'd have to really figure out exactly what you want to do with it. Yeah. Killteam Stream, what do you think about the fact that you usually end up playing the side you sit down at? Oh, okay. At Warhammer World, did you see lots of people switching sides? So, I had to switch sides twice. My first game against the playtester, Wes, he wanted to do that, and my third game against Death Guard, he wanted to do that. But then, my second game, he wanted the side he got, so we didn't switch sides. Would he have switched sides? Don't know. And my fourth game, I don't think he cared, but he was happy with the side he got anyway. I didn't see many people swapping, and I think it's a valid concern, but I don't think... I think that's mainly because the majority of people that go to a tournament are still casual players and want to have fun.
Yeah.
And they're not, and I'm not saying, oh, moving to the other side of the table isn't fun. I mean, it's not. But I'm more saying when they look at a board with fresh eyes, they cannot instantly say, I want that side. And I would put it more down to a skill thing. Unless there's an obvious difference. Like, if you look at those boards, yes, they're asymmetrical, but I don't think it's obvious which side is instantly the best.
Right.
That's my take. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe as soon as you saw them, you're like, oh, that's where I'm starting. I don't know. But do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think once players once we're more comfortable with this version, I think we're just going to get more used to just like rolling attacker defender like right away. Just like you get to your table, you're like, hey, I'm Matt. What mission are we doing? Let's roll attacker defender, and then we'll get unpacked. Right?
That was how I used to do it in the old edition. Before we did anything, could we just roll so that I don't have to unpack my team?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's a bit of a holdover just because like we're used to like getting all our stuff setting up and then being like, okay, let's get this game started. Yeah. I think it's just gonna shift to let's figure that out first because that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I agree. I hope that's what we do at least.
Right.
Kill streams at real tournaments. Yep. On TTS, no problem. Sea Dream GR, who was actually Emmanuel, says hello. And asked if we complained about custodies. Yes, we did. Yeah, we covered that. That's all we've done. Barricades help you control your objective safety. Yes, they do. On most missions, there's normally an option to place a barricade near an objective. I agree, but that's not every mission, and I think that also works in tandem with how much of a clear space you're giving around objectives. But yep, it's a fair point. Like, that is a part of a tactical decision for a barricade. You don't have to set it up directly where you're deploying. You can deploy them as far out as you can. You can put them at a crazy angle so that there's only part of it, because it only has to be within, not wholly within, etc. Yeah. And Tears Frubler says, a thought came to me regarding asymmetrical. It's still strongly cautious about asymmetrical. The map is symmetrical, but parts of visibility blocking terrain are traversable, like doors. Those types of openings are more prevalent near/in 1DZ over the other. So as a general idea, so I've seen this thrown around before, I actually really like the idea that doors in terrain can be moved through as if it was a traversable piece, so it's just one circle to move through. I think that's cool.
Yeah, that's...
But then it's super, then every piece of terrain is different. And where do you stop that? Are you going to say if there's a window in a piece of heavy terrain, which, like the upcoming Imperialis set, or you say, oh, well, I can just move, that's traversable now. It's heavy and traversable or something. Maybe that, I actually have no idea. That might be how that terrain is played, because we haven't seen the terrain. But I think it's a cool idea. I think it's narrative. I'm not sure if we want to implement that for competitive. It would obviously require a bit more thought. But I kind of view there is a reason you cannot move through heavy terrain, and there is a point to it. Like, if you've set the board up correctly, yeah, you shouldn't move through it. Do you have any real thoughts on that?
It's just... I think it can all be worked as long as it's premeditated and done with if an experienced person has stuck this board together and been
yeah, sure,
you know what, it's cool if in this spot this part is traversable, this door, right? That's fine. If it's just a blanket rule hasn't, and then all of a sudden there's 5 doors and it's all of this stuff can be made to work. It's just how much, where. And I do think there are a lot more doors on GW terrain than third party, which tend to just be a block of foam, right? So it's right.
Yeah.
Fair
enough. And Emmanuel says he doesn't like that idea. There you go, basically. Yeah, fair enough. Cool. I also think, I suppose another thing there is there is something inherently good about streamlined and simple, and if you can avoid adding a rule, that is always better. If you can make a good game with no rules, do that, right? And every rule on top of no rules is a negative. Is kind of how you should view game design. Obviously, that's super simple. That's not true. You need rules, but if you don't have to add a rule, you shouldn't. General thing there, I guess. All right. Anyway, yeah.
So you've been playing a ton of Grey Knights lately, hey?
That was a very Canadian sentence. Yeah, I have. I have, eh?
Hey.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Sure. So Grey Knights. Easy pick, right? Because they follow some of my core principles of playing the game for the first time, which is go elite, because it's easier to think. And in these tournaments, you have to go 4 games. Isn't as crazy as the 5 games we used to do, but you know what? I think when the game's new, if you're running 14 models around the board, that can get a little bit tiring.
For sure.
Yeah. So I just do it because it's easier for myself, and I generally prefer elite teams. I always have. Also, a little bit kind of a meta thing of I like to finish games so I can do an interview. Yeah, finishing games quickly is actually, it's something I like anyway, because the shorter a game is, the better generally. but also I actually want to then go and do something else afterwards, which I mean, I feel awkward enough. Man, at Warhammer World, I asked all of my opponents, "Do you want to do a quick interview outside?" Two of them said no. Man, it's so cringe. I'm a cringe lord, and when they say no, it's like they don't know who I am. I'm just some weird dude saying, "Hey, want to be on camera with me?" It's like they don't. Weirdly, they don't. I don't know why that is.
They say no, and you just like stand around there at the same table with them for 15 minutes because you finished your game.
Exactly. It's like, all right, well, fair enough. Okay, good game.
Yeah.
So I like to finish games quickly. I like the idea of so also 3 APL. So that I guess APL size teams is what we could go on to next, because that's like a big thing. But I just think they're cool as well, and they were one of my few teams that made it across completely unscathed. I haven't had to make any more models for them, because I already had a pretty comprehensive roster for Grey Knights, and of course they're like my modded Stormcast guys. I just like them. Yeah, I don't think they're super. I don't think they're like an amazing team. They may well be, but that's not why I picked them or anything. I'm not really viewing the game in that sense yet. I think I will say that in what I've done so far, they're a very inflexible team, which might sound odd because they can do multiple things very well, but I don't see. They've got one loadout, really. I don't think there's a huge benefit in having more than 6 guys on your roster, you know, which is arguably a benefit, and might change. Maybe you're about to tell me I'm wrong. Please do, if you think that.
No, one thing I see a lot of people talking about is like how flexible a team is. And they always use it in terms of like how far can a roster swing? Like what varied equipment options do I have? What tac ops can I take? Like this is all like pre-game like mustering stuff, right?
Sure.
But what doesn't get talked about too much is how flexible a team is like on the table. Can this one model do many different things? Can I move this team in a different way and accomplish something completely different, even though it's the same team that I ran last time? And so I think in that respect, Grey Knights is very flexible, right?
Yes.
They can do a ton of shooting. They can do melee. They can play positional with like their Tide of Shadows up, right? And so I think that's just something I wanted to say while we were talking about flexibility, because I think that's an aspect that doesn't get talked about enough. You can't roster like crazy. It doesn't mean that they're not a flexible team. You can move them very differently on the table.
No, yeah, I completely agree. Just very quickly, Emmanuel says GK in a single word: relentless. Yeah, yes. That's fair. No, so that's a really good point. You're right. Each model individually is very flexible. They have good shooting. They have good melee. They have a way of buffing that particular side of whatever they're going to do. So I agree, and I think that is a key in an elite faction, right? So as elite factions go, I think they're pretty good. In the same way that I think Deathwatch are probably pretty good because they have the roster to do what they want. Once you're on the board, each one does one thing, kind of. You've kitted out your fighter. He's not going to be shooting, right? You've kitted out your gunner. He's not going to be melee. But in the roster step, they've got a lot of options. Grey Knights, kind of the other way round, as you say. Very flexible on the table, which is obviously to their benefit. No flexibility in the roster. And I guess that's what I was talking about. I have had matchups where the Stormbolter is the best weapon to take. That consistent damage is so good. But I have come up against factions where it's just, yes, I'm getting through basically other power armor factions. The Stormbolters just don't do much. I'm going to be honest with you. I've really struggled to, I don't have an answer in shooting for 3-up armor saves. That was how I lost against Sisters. I tried to shoot them some, and they're just like, oh, I saved. Is that 3 up saves?
Yeah.
And actually, if I can extend my complete noobness on that point, I believe that's where I actually went wrong at Warhammer World. After Bad Moon Cafe, I got it into my head that melee is bad. Because I've only got 5 guys. Yes, my melee's good, obviously. But I know that if I go in, I'm taking damage, right?
Right.
Like, I'm guaranteed to almost die if I go into melee, pretty much. And so, for whatever reason, just mentally, I was thinking, I'm going to shoot. And that means I've only got access to the Stormbolter. Which means that against a squishy team, like, let's say, Harlequins, I'm pretty good. They die to Stormbolters really, really well. I can kill 1 or 2 a turn easily. Except the terrain was too heavy, so I couldn't shoot them. And so throughout the entire game, the entire tournament, I mean, I was just I hardly got into melee. Like I basically didn't. I think I charged throughout the entire thing like maybe 3 times tops, which is an incredibly small amount for Grey Knights. So I think that's obviously something that I need to work on for myself to figure out. Yeah, you have a flexible team. You have to do both things at the same time. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't have a ton of experience with Grey Knights. The elite team I've messed around most with is Heretic Astartes.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, I think in general, I think the big thing when you're running an elite team is you can't trade models, right? Especially early on in the game. You can't be like, you don't want to be doing shoot twice turn 1 and like sticking your guy up on a vantage point, shooting 2 models, because every team has like that one big gun that's just gonna take you out, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And if you trade one of your models for one of his, that's just like not worth it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So I think in general with elite teams right now, you need to be very like cautious and aware turn 1 of when you're exposing yourself, and only put damage in when like you can maybe do like a move shoot dash to avoid any return fire. And I think with elite teams, you're really trying to push for a really definitive, like kind of like have the brake on, just kind of like simmering until that one turn where you can just fire everything up all at once and put the other player into like an unrecoverable state, like off of like maybe the back of like a shoot twice tactic or a fight twice tactic, something like that, where in one turn things just start sliding so fast for him that he can't respond. Which is a struggle. But yeah, I think I see players get into trouble most when they start trying to trade just from the outset. They're like, I've got this heavy gunner, and they feel like if he's not getting his shots in every turn, they feel like he was a waste.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know what, just having that model left alive on the board is so much more impactful. Once the rest of your team gets going, you really want to avoid is like, let me try and like format my thoughts a little bit. Okay. So if the Dark Lance, let's just say you're against Drukhari, they've got like a Dark Lance and a Blaster, so they've got like 2 guns that are like a threat to you every turn, right?
Yeah.
If you have like one guy engaged round 1 and he trades out a bit and then gets shot, and then round 2 you have a guy that pops out to do his little thing and he trades out a bit and then gets shot, right? All of a sudden that Dark Lance has got like 2 kills and you're down 2 models and you've traded out like maybe 2 for 2 or like 2 for 3 or something.
Yeah.
If you get to a spot on the board with all of your guys concealed by maybe like turn 2 or 3 and then engage everybody all at once, all of a sudden that Dark Lance only gets 1 shot and then it's engaged, and then you have someone else who goes and deals with that.
Yeah.
And then another target, right? And so you oversaturate him with threats for that 1 turn where all of your guys are coming online at the same time, and you're able to trade out very efficiently at that point, because his guns that are able to deal with you have too many targets to deal with all of them.
Sure.
So I think that's like a gonna be the key point with elite teams. It's just using their all of their APL is front loaded towards the beginning of the turn. Because they have less activations but more APL, right?
Yeah.
And so you need to use all of that at the same time to just kind of break your opponent.
Yeah. Yep.
Without a little bit here and there. Yeah.
No, sure. Yeah, I think that's generally good advice. I mean, certainly when things started to go wrong for me is because this is, I can picture it perfectly. It was the first round of my sister's fight. Round 2, as I said, round 1 went great. I lost, but it was fine. Round 2, I saw how he set up, and I thought to myself, I don't need to use Tide of Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole rest of the day was downhill. Yeah. Always use Tide. Doesn't matter if they're 100% on conceal orders, just use Tide of Shadows. Right? Yeah.
Right.
That was where it went wrong for me. Obviously that's a bit of a joke, but in a very general sense, it meant that was the mindset change. It was, right, I'm strong enough to take whatever they're doing, right? And no, you're not. So yeah, there you go. Yeah, fair comments. APL. We're going to talk about APL. Then we're going to talk about favorite factions. Then we're going to have a quick chat about the Hunter Clade. Cool. If chat wants to chime in, feel free, but that's our rough guideline. Okay, APL. So I really like APL 3 teams. They feel good to play. As you've mentioned a little bit there, when you're playing an objective, an action objective based mission, you can move, do the thing, run away. That feels good. It feels like I'm doing the right thing. I'm making the right choices. I don't like, the APL 2 teams. Some of them I love. I love the fluff, etc. But I don't like the feel of playing them. I think in a way they're kind of easier to play in the sense that you don't have to spend as much time thinking about each activation, because you know you can only do 2 things. So you're doing something. You move, shoot. You charge, fight. You move, dash.
Right.
That's basically what you're deciding to do. And you're kind of in one mindset almost, whereas when you're an APL 3 guy, you're doing everything a little bit because you need to, because you have the fewer activations, but you got the APL to make up for it, sort of thing. And I just feel cool when I'm playing an APL 3 faction. However, as I think you've kind of said, and it's ignore Custodes. It seems like the APL 2 factions that have a few more models are probably actually stronger. Like, if you were looking to just go, podium at a tournament, I would suspect you're probably taking in an APL 2 faction. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think... I guess this is gonna segue a little bit into favorite factions.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I'm most familiar right now with Genestealer cults.
Yes.
So APL 2 faction, usually going in with 11 activations and 12 models. So one thing that so there's the activation advantage that the APL 2 team's going to have. So I have more separate activations than the other player.
Yeah.
Compared to the front-loaded APL advantage that the elite team has.
Yeah.
And so what I think makes the activation advantage so strong is that you make all the decisions in regards to distance control. If I'm playing against Grey Knights, I can have 6 of my activations, or 5 of my activations, just be moving guys safely around in my back line. You have to make all the choices, not knowing where the rest of my team's going to be.
Yeah.
And then I get to choose very specific distances and positioning for all the guys I'm moving upfield, right? If I want to... There's this 9-inch... Or sorry, 10-inch... 9-inch sweet spot, where if I'm standing at 9 inches, you can't move up to me and get within 2 inches of me to shoot if I'm concealed, right? Whereas I can charge 8 inches and be within an inch of you to fight.
Okay.
So you can look for those magic bands. If the other team has 3 APL, it means maybe they can move dash up to you and shoot. But if you have your Genestealer Cult mining laser in the back line, you can position that so that they don't have the choice of doing a move, shoot, dash back to safety. At that point, their position's locked in, and you're trading like one model for one model again. Right?
Great. Yeah.
And so I think that's really where the interplay is coming. It's between the activation advantage team controlling the distance and really making they get final say in all of the choices of like what the final board state's going to look like.
Yeah.
And it's the onus is really on the 3 APL player with that like front loaded APL advantage. The onus is on them to make something happen.
Yeah.
I feel like you were saying you were finding like in your match with Harlequins, you felt like you could never stand on an objective.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you did that, you knew that they were going to respond with something.
Yes.
And that's often what happens with these 2 APL teams versus the 3 APL teams. Is I get final say in the distances. Instead of pointing guys anywhere close to you, I can just point guys at the objectives. Turn 1, you move up safely. Turn 2, I point at objectives. Turn 3, I don't have to do anything until all of your movement's done. You can stand on objectives, but that will give me the charge, which is a huge deal in the fight phase, obviously. Or not fight phase, but the having the charge is a huge deal in close combat, obviously. Or I can point my gun, like my mining laser, at the objectives.
Sure.
And I don't have to do anything until you've settled everybody. So you have the choice of whether just to take damage by moving on to the objective, or you have the choice of holding back another turn, right? And then I have the choice of I can just do the same thing. I don't have to come closer to you. I can still just point at the objectives, or I can maybe move one model onto an objective at the end of the turn, not giving you any overwatch, getting a small point lead.
Yeah.
And then round 2, or like the next turn, if I go first, I can move that model back.
Yeah.
Or if I'm going second, maybe you can kill him, but that still doesn't. At that point, you're still in that same situation. Do you charge him? In which case, now you're in range of all my other guys.
Yeah.
Do you shoot him? In which case, you're still not on an objective.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's that. I found that like distance control aspect of the higher activation teams to be super strong. So far.
Okay. So, do you? I mean, from the sounds of it, you have mainly played the APL2 teams as well.
I played a lot of Heretic Astartes as well.
Heretic, sorry.
Yeah.
But,
so the teams I've played most of right now are Heretic Astartes, Genestealer Cult, and AdMech. I played some Forge World and some of the new Hunter Clade.
Okay.
So I'm trying to get a good mix in. I like the APL 3 teams. It feels like dancing when you're playing them, right?
Sure.
You're just like,
yeah.
I'm here, I'm over there. I'm like doing everything, right? You can't touch me. But I think at the higher level, I don't think right now I don't think my Heretics could beat my Genestealer Cult, if that makes sense.
Right, sure.
Like I just feel like against a player who's like very patient and knows how to really push that activation advantage and really control the pace of the game that way. I think it's really on the like Marine player to come up with something to like throw that plan into a loop. Like,
or do you mean it's more like it's up to the Genestealer Cult player to mess up, right?
it's either on the Gene Stealer player cult to mess up, or it's on the Marine player to make like a really big move.
Okay.
And like a really big ballsy move at some point, and they have to like hit that point like on the nose.
Okay, sure.
They kind of have to flip everything over to engage at like the exact right moment.
Mm-hmm.
And take some big risks, I think. Because I think that the kind of like slow, cagey, grindy play is just going to favor the higher activation team.
Yeah.
So it's on the Marine player to like take a risk, make a big move, and hope that kind of sets the tone for the rest of the game.
Okay, fair enough. And would you say so? Mechanically, what is your favorite faction?
Gene Stealer cult.
Gene Stealer cults. You think? Yeah. Is that because you actually just like how they play, or do you mean I think they are the best? I can win a game with them faction.
I like how they play. They suit me as a player.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think they're like hands down the best faction. There's nothing about them that seems like that you look at it and you're like, oh, that's broken. It's not like people like look at like the 10 Gene Stealer team or something like that. And
yeah.
Like, oh man, that special rule is just brutal, right?
Yeah.
I find Gene Stealer cult suits me as a player because they have so many tools like to do a bit of everything. They've got like really nasty melee models.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the best melee models, but they're good enough, right?
Sure.
They have really good shooting in a few models. They don't have a lot of it, but they have access to good shooting. And it's shooting that, with their ploys, can be like one directional, because I can shoot and then go back into conceal. And then with their ploys, they have access to not only the conceal ploys, but also the forward deployment ones, which I think are super strong, like positional tools, and they really help you problem solve like missions or situations that you think you might struggle with.
Okay.
And so, in like summary, they have like shooting, they can do positioning, they can do melee, and they have a lot of models. And when you combine all of that together, it's just like it feels like there's always something that you should be able to do in any given situation.
Okay.
And so that's kind of my style of team. I never like to lean too heavy one way or the other. I don't like teams that are like all shooting or all melee.
Mm-hmm.
I just find that play style is like too easy to. It's too one dimensional.
Sure. You can get a hard counter sort of thing, and then there's not much you can do regardless of play. I think the best way to phrase it is you like a toolbox faction, right?
Right.
Yeah. You like to have the tools, and then and then you're the craftsman, and
So GT, they don't have the best tools, but they have a lot of them.
Right. And I think it's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. We did quickly say Othilian. APL3 is so nice. Favorite team, probably DG, because I dislike losing my precious models. That's fair. That's fair. I think that's a big thing for beginner players. Like, that's why I kind of like elite teams. I feel bad if I'm just taking models off the board all the time, which generally you are doing with the more elite teams, because the horde teams, because a single shot, that's probably a dead guy. So yeah, I think that's fair. Although it probably should be my Harlequins. They seem super fast and deadly, but mistakes can be rough. Yeah, they are the definition of the glass cannon, aren't they? Yeah. I think Harlequins are great. I have no issues with them. It's also said Necrons also treated me well so far, though I guess they're pretty noob friendly, as others have said. I'm not sure if that's true.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk to you about Necrons a little bit, because I haven't played as them. I haven't seen them. Apparently they took 4th at Warhammer World, but I didn't even see the Necron player.
Okay.
Yeah. So Necrons attract me because they're one of those things that, like, they tick quite a few boxes in that I think I could actually hobby them into a full 40k army, and that attracts me. And for me, I always want, my kill team to hit my 40k army and like that, and be good in bow. Well, good in bow.
Right.
So Necrons interest me for that, because obviously they're just, spray them silver or whatever, and you're done. But their movement speed scares me. Now, I've played Death Guard a few times, and I get how Death Guard get around it. That disgustingly resilient, that just does so much work, at least against my teams that I've played them with. So I get it.
Right.
And Necrons don't really have that. Obviously, they recover, 2 wounds at the start of each turning point, but I feel like they don't have the durability to hang around as much as Death Guard, for example, to be able to use that, living metal ability.
Right.
And then they're really slow, and being slow scares me, because I feel like this game, when it comes down to it, is all about how far, can you flank me? And there are certainly some teams, like let's say Gene Stealers, where if you can't flank them, they're going to beat you.
Right.
And I think that's pretty safe to say with the Gene Stealers, because they're going to charge you. Like, you can't just hang back. You have to be on a point at some point, and if they're just going to wait there until you do, and then kill you. But what are your thoughts? Have you played much against or as Necrons?
I played against it a few times. Kellen, I mentioned him a bit. Kellen Foster, he won the tournament yesterday with Drakari.
Yeah.
I played against his Necrons.
Okay.
In the he was in my pod for the tournament that I won. So I got to play against them, and I've seen a few of his other games. He's probably the guy in the TTS scene that's messed around most with them.
Right.
They've got like an incredible late game.
Right.
Not only do they regenerate their wounds, but with reanimation protocols, like their models are just sticking around. You're definitely right in that they have, like, their movement gives them problems in the early game, and they're also kind of lacking a model with access to that like 4 or 5 break point of melee damage.
Right.
Where even their flayed ones are at 3-4. Whereas a lot of these other melee models that are coming in at 8 wounds. So it's like outside of that, what a flayed one can like realistically 2-shot.
Yeah.
And so they can kind of get punished by, like, what I found in my game against them is that they were super weak to being charged and not fought. Because they're all APL2 models, so they can't fall back and shoot. Yeah. And they're all group activation 1 models, and so you can't chain another guy in. So if you charge a guy that's already activated and don't fight him that turn, next turn he really doesn't have any course of action to take. He either lets you kill that model and then charge deeper into his line, or he falls back that model.
That is,
now it's your turn.
Right.
You still get your charge in your fight, right?
So how would you get around that for them? Like, as a Necron player, you're afraid they're just gonna, they're a 14-man horde. They're just gonna cycle charge you, and you're just
right. So a lot of it, I think, comes down. A lot of people I've seen talking about Necrons, they're all about those like Immortals and the Starfire cores, and just like that combination that just puts out probably the best shooting in the game.
Yeah.
But you have to realize that if you're going against one of these teams that can like put out those like melee models, you don't need to have like the best shooting in the game. It doesn't matter. You're not going to get those shots unless you force your opponent to give you those shots, right? So you have to. What's going to define like the better Necron players from the weaker Necron players is their abilities to come up with a solution for that melee threat. So Necrons do have like equipment that can kind of like counteract. Like they've got some melee options for equipment. I think there's stuff that like gives them.
Yeah, it's like mortal wounds on the charge, like Tesla field, random things like that.
Bayonet thing, I don't know, something like that. And the big one I think is that they have access to grenades as well, right? Grenades are like
the nano scarabs,
right. And so what I'm kind of interested in is you take that flayed one team, that's I think 5 models, at a bad damage threshold, right? That's 2-3 damage.
Yeah.
You get those flayed ones, nano scarabs or whatever the grenades are. Now those flayed ones are shooting models that have indirect. And as soon as you hit one of your opponent's melee models, all you need is like one damage, like one hit to go through, and now they're at that damage threshold that your flayed ones can deal with.
Right, sure.
Right? On top of that, you've got your resurrection protocols. So your flayed one team, it's not really a 5-man team. It could be like an 8-man team, right?
Sure, yeah, for a turn, yeah.
You can get 3 of those around. Yeah. And then every time one of his guys charges your flayed ones, he's also putting himself in an engage order. And so you have to be careful with your positioning. Make sure he's charging your flayed one. You're resurrecting your flayed one after it dies, shooting that engaged model now with one of your immortals and downing it. And winning the attrition game with a combination of like dragging him into engage orders and using grenades to bring him into a threshold that your flayed ones are effective at.
Right, sure.
So I think plays like that could be really interesting. You can also kind of do the same thing with warriors. You don't need to go the flayed one route. But I don't know. I like the flayed ones a little more personally.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the warriors at 3 attacks are gonna like they do the same damage, but I think they're just gonna be so much less consistent.
Oh, you mean putting the phase blade bayonets onto the warriors?
Yeah, you could either give the warriors like the bayonets or the grenades, and you're using them as like the front line.
Yeah.
You can charge them if you need to because they still do have that 3-4 damage.
Right.
But because they're only, I think, 3 attacks.
Yeah, I think they're 3 attacks. Yeah.
Right. They're gonna be at a scary threshold where it's like, well, even that guy who got hit by the grenade, he just parries one of your hits. Right. Sure. All of a sudden, you can't finish him off. Like the Necron shooting is just so tempting to like go double fire teams into because it's just so good, right?
Yeah, sure.
But you have to make some concessions to the fact that if the other guy's going to let you shoot him, he's already lost the game. If he's a good player, he's not going to be giving up shots, right?
But is that not an issue again of terrain placement? Like I was saying, for my Grey Knights to be on points, I had to be in the open.
Right.
You know, like, is that maybe a failing of terrain placement in the TTS stuff you've been doing? I don't know what maps are being played. I don't know how you guys are kind of playing that.
Yeah, to some degree, though. But, like, if you just look at Necrons as an archetype, if you take... Let's just make a few, like, bold statements and say they have the best shooting in the game.
Yeah, I'll take it.
And they're slow.
Yep, that's fair.
And they're durable. Okay? If you take a team like that and have the terrain set up so that they do get a lot of shots off, like, what are we doing?
No, I agree. Yeah, sure.
If you take that good quality of shooting and mean that even models with limited movement can get lots of shots off every turn, the board's probably way too open. Like,
no, I agree with that. Yeah.
It has to be the way to punish Necrons is by not giving up shots, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. Again, I'm sure there's an optimum terrain layout that we haven't found yet that is that perfect balance. Because you're right. You're exactly right. Like, if I can just line up 4 immortals with Gorse blasters, the only thing you can do is not be shot by me.
Right.
But and if you can't do that because of the terrain, at some point, that's good, because that means the terrain is forcing you to do something. And as a Necron player, I can't do anything else, so I have to shoot you. Right. But then at some point, it's bad because exactly as you said. No, fair enough. Fair enough.
It's
Yeah.
I've seen I've seen Kellen Foster play against like some really strong Tau players,
Mm-hmm.
and Necrons just seem like so dominant in that matchup.
Oh, really?
That's one of the things that makes me feel like they're the strongest shooting team in the game,
Yeah.
is because like Tau lives off of their shooting,
Yeah.
and all of their tools are to like photon grenades and like the grav and stuff, and everything is just trying to limit the other person's melee. Well, when the Necrons don't want to melee you, and they're just like, no, it's a firefight, let's do it, right?
Yeah, let's go.
Is incredibly one-sided. Like,
Sure.
I've seen Kellen just like table Tau players just with like 8 immortals, just kind of like walking up the field, just laying down. And
Okay, yeah, you're right. That does sound like an issue with yeah, he shouldn't be able to do that, I feel.
well, it's because the Tau player is engaging so much, right?
Yeah,
he's like,
yeah. That is an issue with the player skill or whatever.
right.
But at some point, you have to fight.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that like there are bad matchups in the game.
Yeah,
There's way too many factions to try and pretend like every matchup is balanced. And I think that's just one where the Necrons are just better at doing what Tau wants to do, and all of Tau's tools to combat that just like aren't applicable in that matchup.
Fair. Awesome. Cool. Yeah. I'm interested in Necrons. The reason I haven't played them yet, so I'm not quite sure what I want to do, and I hate flayed ones. And so I want to buy some flayed ones and convert their creepy claws into being like phase knives. They're like sneaky commando Necrons.
Yeah,
so there you go. That's
the like long fingernails. Like...
yeah, that's not into that. Yeah. Yeah. And like instead of skin, it's going to be like camo phase cloak or something.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be cool.
That's much better than creepy body horror things.
Right.
Okay, so we were going to jump on to something else, but actually, we were going to have a talk about flamers, weren't we?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have some thoughts on flamers?
Yeah, a lot of people don't like them. I like them.
Okay. Awesome. That's fair.
I think they're like they have a place, right? I don't think you're going to see them on like marine equivalents. Models with like 3-up ballistic skill and access to like bolter and like better style weapons are just going to get more bang for their buck off of those. But on like chaff models, they're just great. Like Genestealer Cult, like Heretic Astartes, the Cultists, like those are models with like 4-up ballistic skill, 2-3 damage on like their like auto pistols or whatever.
Yeah.
They're so unlikely to like do much with those things that doing any damage at all with a flamer is much like it's much better. Yeah. And especially when you start looking at like wound break points, like for example, hybrid metamorph is 4 attacks, 3-up, 4/6 brutal balanced rending.
Right.
So it means that it's probably getting 6 damage crits, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these other melee models that other teams are fielding are going to be coming in around 8 or 9 wounds, which means if you hit them once with a flamer, if they're at 8 wounds, or twice with a flamer at 9 wounds, all of a sudden they're in that one-shot range, right?
Sure.
Or it's that range where if they charged you, you got your 1 crit in before they kill you, right? And so
they can be flamed.
2 or 4 wounds. And so like with Genestealer Cult, you've got the flamer, and then you've got the 2 metamorph gunners with hand flamers as well.
Okay.
And so they're just like just having access to that really consistent 2 damage or 4 damage is really nice in those matchups, just having that option. Just because it's at a very important wound breakpoint. And then you can also it also lets you punish players that like group up in their deployment way too much. Like both Heretics and Genestealer Cult have access to like the 4 deployment ploy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you get attacker, the other guy bunches up behind their terrain. You see that he's bunched up. You forward deploy your flamer.
Mm-hmm.
You see that he has his heavy gunner in conceal. You know he has to pick infiltrate.
Yeah.
So you either pick fortification or infiltrate. You go first turn 1.
Yeah.
You walk up and you like split really consistent damage on like 3 models, right? It's just like an instant punish that they don't have a lot of ways to avoid unless they really spread out, which means you can probably just get a free shot off with your mining laser or something instead, right?
Right, okay.
And so I think on that kind of like chaff model, they're just super efficient at always being able to push some damage through. And I think people get a little hung up on how little damage it does put through.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is very important damage.
Sure.
I guess would be a good way to say that.
Yeah, so you're not viewing it as a weapon that kills things. You're viewing it as a weapon that allows things to be killed.
Right. It finishes a model off or puts it into a different
one-shot
threat
state.
range.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Like a Gene Stealer who's been hit by a flamer once is not going to charge a metamorph anymore.
No, because he's done. Yeah.
Because it's going to lose that fight now.
Yeah.
You haven't killed the model, but you've killed its primary purpose, right?
Right. Sure. Okay. Fair. Yeah. So I think was it Birinid I was talking to, or was it the Strategic Advantage guys, or called? Either way, when I said, "Oh, flamers," let's talk about that. I think since then my thoughts have evolved a smidge and it was actually looking at Necrons that made me rethink the red range, right?
Right.
Because at first I was looking at Necrons and I was like, I like being able to shoot all the way across the board. That's really like that's fun. But then I was looking at the Warriors and like, okay, well, why wouldn't I just take 4 more Immortals? If that's what I want to do, why don't I just take the better gun?
Right.
And then I was like, so what's the point of the Warriors then? And then of course I look at the other gun. I'm like, okay, well, how am I supposed to use that to have over half my team have a red range weapon? And so then my thoughts continued down this path for several days until eventually I was like, okay, I get it now. Yeah. I get the purpose of the red range weapon. And it's, I think there are multiple ways you can use it. It was actually Wes that said this, the way he uses a melter, it's a defensive weapon. You put that melter somewhere, that's 6, an enemy cannot move into that. Right. You don't have to charge up a board. You don't have to view a red weapon as, oh, that means I have to cross half the board and I've only got 2 circle movement. I can't do that. You can view it in a different way. And I just think that in itself made me think differently about how red weapons work in general. And yeah, that I'm kind of okay with flamers now. And I think the other thing to note is, of course, they have a place. They're not auto takes. In the last edition, they were auto takes. Right? There were so many factions where you just took it because it negated your ballistic skill. So statistically, it was just always the best thing you could take. For many of the weaker, cheaper, bad BS guys, guard equivalents. And this is a game without points. Having a weapon that has a place in certain matchups is exactly the point of not having points, right? It's not something you always take. They haven't balanced it by giving it lower point cost. They've decided this is how it works, and so yeah, I'm actually totally okay with flames at the moment. With that said, I don't see anyone using them. So maybe I guess it's a tough thing to filter out. Are we not seeing them because they have a general perception that they're not good? Are people generally not taking the teams to these beginner level tournaments where flamers are good, and so actually people are picking correctly and not taking the flamer? Or so they're a wait and see thing. If we have to think about, are they actually weak or strong at this point?
Right. I'm just trying to think about who has access, because I do think that the like 3 at ballistic skill like bolter models probably don't take the flamers just because they're still gonna do more damage even at that short range with their bolter, right?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
And so I'm just looking. I think so. Like Genestealer Cult, Heretics have them on cultists if they run cultists.
Yeah.
Um,
Guard have them.
Imperial Guard have them.
Yeah.
And Tyranids kind of have them, but better.
Oh, the acid
mod.
Yeah.
We see a lot of acid maul play, I think.
I think acid maul's fine. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah. I think that's fine.
Yeah, so it's mostly, I guess, Imperial Guard, Genestealer Cult, and Heretics that are at that like 4 ballistic skill, chaff model, chassis, where these guns do really work.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess we probably haven't seen a lot of players running those teams at this moment.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So I just felt we had to have to talk about the flamers because we did say we would. In general, I'd probably say right now, if I had the choice, I'm probably still going to take a grenade launcher instead because I like being able to swap between a frag and a crack. I think that's pretty good. Yeah. But hey, flamers, who knows?
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's the thing too. Like, if you have that choice, take the grenade launcher. Probably.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
You don't have the choice, right? It's like
that's true.
You can take, like with Genestealer Cults, you get 2 special weapons.
And it's just hand flamers, isn't it? Oh, on the metamorphs, I mean.
Yeah, you get hand flamers on the metamorphs, and then you get your heavy weapon gunner, which is your like mining laser, seismic cannon, whichever. And then you get 2 special weapons, and they both have to be different. So you've already got your grenade launcher. Your other one can be a flamer or a Weber. And that's matchup dependent.
Okay.
The flamer can be super useful. It's like against, for example, I used it against in my finals against Dratho. He's that witch player running full engage with the plasma grenades. Flamer was super nice there because he's got all these engaged models. They're not concealed behind each other. So I was able to like forward deploy a flamer, win that initiative, and like burn 3 or 4 of his models like turn 1. If he had been doing, if I'd been playing Kellen Foster and he's running more the conceal witches, like, or the conceal team rather than the engage team, the flamer isn't as good because it still has to be a valid target, right? You can't split shots off if the models are still hiding behind each other and concealed. And so in that case, instead of forward deploying the flamer, you just forward deploy a guy with a frag grenade or something, right?
Yes, just to make a complete, like, off-topic suggestion here. I'm gonna make a marine team of infiltrators called Conceal Team 6. Okay.
Yes.
You said
Please do it.
There you go. Okay, all right, moving on. Yeah, sorry. The other thing to think about there is a slightly different math. Maybe is the heavy flamers, which we know that sisters get, and the Death Guard get, and they have heavy.
That is tough.
Yeah, I'm less convinced about those. You know, I'm sure sometimes they get an amazing hit off, like sure, but I feel like there's always a better option with that.
Yeah, it's like,
but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Right, my yeah, the only thing I could kind of like relate that to is like Genestealer Cult has access to those, I want to call them demolition charges.
Yes.
Like the big ones. Yeah. I always get which is demolition, which is blasting.
Sure. Yeah.
But they've got the one that has like AP on it, a ton of damage.
The 4 EP. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they can't use it the same turn that they do a movement.
Yes.
Because they're 2 AP models.
Makes it really tough.
Right. But I still take them a lot.
Okay.
Just because it's like you have all these equipment points to spend, but you don't have a lot of effective things to spend them on in certain matchups.
Yeah.
And so, like, against Marines, frag grenades aren't going to do anything. Maybe, like, Structural Surveyor just isn't applicable on this board. Sure. Stuff like that. Your equipment really ends up being, like, a bipod and then 2 of these huge demolition charges.
Right.
And then it's just like, you know what? I'll just move them up the field. Get them in range. If I win initiative, they're on like group activation 2 guys. I get to toss both. That's amazing.
Yeah,
right?
That's fair.
If I lose initiative,
well, they're dead. Yeah.
Well, but even then, he only deals with one of them, right?
That's right. One of them dies.
The board, the other guy gets to go, or maybe he had to deal with that one guy, but because he had to use his first activation to do that, he wasn't able to deal with like the metamorph who wants to charge him, or he wasn't able to deal with the mining laser who's lined up. And so, in that situation, I think they're still useful, but it's because you can put them on these stupid little chaff models that have no other purpose in the game, right?
Then to do that,
Yeah, but you're talking about a heavy flamer that has to be on like your one sister gunner that you get, or like your one Death Guard gunner. It's like that's not the play at all, because
big trade.
Yeah, you lose initiative, and it's like, oh, this guy was so important to my team.
Yeah.
And now he's not doing anything.
That's fair. So final talk will be AdMech stuff, and then we're gonna wrap things up. I actually don't have a huge amount to say about the AdMech stuff. In regards to actual gameplay, because obviously they released on like Friday, and then I went, or whenever it was, and then I went to a tournament. So I really don't know too much, but I believe you do. But I'm happy to kind of discuss like the meta of it, like releasing on White Dwarf versus other things, etc. But let's start with the gameplay, if you want. How do you think the team performs? Because you said you played.
I really like it. Yeah. I played 2 games with them so far, so I'm not super experienced, but I've got a chance to get a feel for them. As I talked about earlier, I don't really like teams that lean too heavy into shooting or too heavy into melee.
Yeah.
So the fact that they don't have the same roster swing as Forge World isn't a problem for me. Like I didn't really see myself ever running like a double Skitarii team, for example. I just don't like that kind of gameplay.
Sure.
And then I think they've got some really interesting tools to deal with models, or to deal with strategies that could have given them trouble in their Forge World aspect. Like their ploys are amazing now. Their equipment's really interesting. Infiltrators are like, between their ability to deny enemy models rerolls when they're being targeted, and the Vanguard's rad saturation, like with the treats as injured condition, all of a sudden we have a way to like deal with those really heavy melee teams that we never had like the grenades to deal with before. And it's like a very different way of dealing with it that is pretty unique to them. So I'm kind of interested. I don't have enough experience with it yet to know exactly how that plays out, but I think it's a pretty neat tool set to be able to work with.
Okay. I would say, just to clarify, in your view, they are definitely better than the Compendium team.
Yeah, a lot of people will really give me kickback on that.
Okay.
But in my view, I think they're better.
Sure.
I think they plug a lot of holes, and the Compendium team seemed, like I was saying before, I'm like kind of like a toolbox person. I like to have like a lot of tools, and I think the Compendium team was really lacking in certain respects.
Okay.
So I like the direction that this team's been pushed in. I think the main drawback is they have access to less TAC ops. I think they only have Seek and Destroy, and I want to say Infiltration.
Right.
Maybe it's Recon. I think it's Recon.
Okay.
Seek and Destroy and Recon. which is a little limiting, but I think those are also two. I think that's enough for the team, though.
Okay.
Like, I think you can be pretty successful with just those two.
Okay. Fair. Do you have any your best loadout? Like makeup of the team? You always take a 2 dictats or whatever. Or... I don't think you can do that. That's not the point.
Yeah. So the neat thing is you're not limited to like the fire teams anymore. Yeah. So you can take a mix of Vanguard, Rangers, infiltrators, and Rust Stalkers, right?
But there do seem to be kind of, in my opinion, like inbuilt thresholds. Like, because if you go over 3, then you lose the gunner. Yeah. So it's almost like they want you to take 3 and then get the 2 gunners and. Right.
That's just the start.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
You take more than 4 of the robots, like 4 of the Sicarians.
Yeah.
And so your standard loadout is going to be 6 and 4, right?
Okay.
And then the only reason to drop a Sicarian is to get access to the 3rd gunner, which has to be a different weapon.
Oh, the Arquebus. Which means
that weapon has to be the Arquebus.
Okay, I'd do that.
But there's some neat things. The Arquebus, like now AdMech does have a way to boost APL.
Yes.
So the Arquebus can now dash shoot.
Yeah.
If it's paired with that model.
Yeah.
And depending on how you're... The one cheesy play I have for the Arquebus right now is like, depending on how people like to play with base overhangs.
Yeah.
I'm really against it. I don't think bases should be allowed to overhang because I think it gives you incentives to put your models at risk, like just physically.
Oh, okay, all right.
Because like the more you lean out,
then technically the better of an angle, right?
And it's like, well, okay, but you're also like balancing your model on like this little tiny threshold, right? So I hate that, and it but if you're playing in with a group that allows overhangs, think of the overhang that like an Arquebus can get on its oval base.
Oh, that's
where
true.
The model's weighted on one side and the base is just the gun.
Yeah, that's true.
You can extend your...
That is a bit crazy.
From a vantage point, like probably like 2
yeah, easy. That's quite funny. Yeah.
So it's in general it's going to be a mix of Ranger of like the 6-4 split. But there are very good reasons to take Rust Stalkers, Infiltrators, Rangers, and Vanguard in like a very situational mix. So really depending on what mission, what opponent, I can see you swapping in and out like all of those models.
Okay. Fair enough. Cool. Yeah, I don't really have a huge amount to say about the team itself. Haven't played them. They've got good gunners. There you go. That's my view.
Yeah, they got good guns. Their melee's really good too now, and they've got movement now too. Like right. If you take the Rust, there's really good reasons to take Rust Stalkers now. Like there was like no reason to do that in the Forge World team.
Oh
yeah,
yes,
the Rust Stalkers are more durable.
Yeah.
If they're in cover, they retain 2, and then they have equipment that lets them ignore the first 2 inches of like a climb, traverse, drop.
Right.
And so they can get places they couldn't. And there's also that like imperative that adds to a model's movements that you could either give to your whole team for a turn, or you can pay a CP to give it to one guy.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden you've got a good shooting team, but you've got a melee model that can like climb and jump over things like crazy and has an extra inch of charge.
Okay.
It's a neat toolbox to work with. Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have any thoughts about Kill Team getting White Dwarf content?
Oh man, like I'll probably never buy a White Dwarf.
Okay.
I'll just at it until they
until they give us the annual, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Fair.
I don't know. There's a mix. I like getting the content. I don't like the format the content's in.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That's GW, right?
Yeah, fair. No, I think I'm about the same. I also think so. It's great that they're putting good Kill Team content into White Dwarf. Nice. And like this issue there's been a lot in there. It hasn't just been this is your team. There's a battle report. There's discussion. It's like, yeah, okay, that's good kill team content. Hopefully, some people that buy the White Dwarf didn't like. They were convinced to go and play kill team because of it. Who knows? You know, so like good. That's all good. I'm never taking a White Dwarf to a tournament. Right? Yeah. And I'm not going to scan it myself. I'm still going to buy the White Dwarf, but then I am going to use somebody else's scans online to if I need to use those rules, which is super weird, but fine. And I think also most kill team players were very scared of White Dwarf content because that brought us demons and Kroot in the last edition. And some random scenarios with Blackstone Fortress and the Ambots and the Zote and stuff, which it was just bad content, right? So so because of that, I'm just super skeptical, but I also accept that they seem to be doing this whole like kill team is now a real thing that GW does. And therefore it is in the White Dwarf, and therefore we are giving you rules in the White Dwarf, and these are your real rules. They're not like, oh hey, by the way, here's the Blood Raven sub faction in White Dwarf, you know, which to me is like, fine, I guess. They seem these are the real rules, which is odd, good but odd. And I guess as long as the content remains good, and the teams they give us are like interesting and good, then like okay, I'll take it.
Like this one seemed to hit a bit of that sweet spot, I think, where it's like an interesting team without much power creep. Sure. Which I think everybody was worried about as well. Is that these like there were all the fears around the Octarius teams at the beginning, and then again with the White Dwarf team. People are just like, oh, what are they going to do? And like, there's people that will argue with me about it that maybe it's not power creep at all. Like, lots of people still like the Forge World team. I think there's a little bit of it, but not really relative to the meta. Like, maybe relative to its compendium version, but overall, like, this is not a broken team by like any respect, right?
If AdMech used to be 8th best team, they're now high 8th best team, or they just creep to 7th best team if they're lucky. Yeah.
Like in most matchups, I think like the matchup didn't really change too much.
Sure.
But I think in certain matchups they got a little bit better, and I think it was in matchups that they were struggling with before. So I like all in all, I think. Like balance-wise, I think they hit the nail on the head on this one. So,
and now, final thing? Oh, actually, somebody said something. Is it better than waiting 2 years for your team to be released in a box? Yes. There you go. Easy. Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah. Fair enough. So I guess final thing. Do you have any like speculation on any of the teams coming up? Do you have any ideas like where they're going to go with either those Sisters or the Pathfinders, or do you want to take a wild guess at what they might do for one of the factions? Like you're a GC the Colts guy, right?
Yeah.
If you had to guess what they're going to do to your faction, what do you think the real release will be? That's fun speculation. Go for it.
I want to guess that GC the Cult gets a box, not a White Dwarf.
Okay.
Because I think their their models and their fluff would support like a really customizable like Craig style team. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sure.
Like models with lots of character, lots of little bits. Like compare that to like say Necrons. I think Necrons are going to get a White Dwarf because what does a Necron box release look like?
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
You can't really like give them much individuality. So I want to say they get a box. But geez, as to what that changes for the team, I have no idea. I mean, I guess more special abilities. I think in general, there's might be a bit of a push for these box teams to be like a little weaker stat blocks, but more special abilities.
Sure.
Stuff like that. So I would expect like a lot of flavorful like tactics and ploys, but maybe you're dialed back a little on like how many like power units you can bring. I kind of wonder what the sisters are gonna look like. I know they've released a bit. It feels to me like if we just had to guess the stats of those models, like 7 or 8 wounds, 4 up armor.
Oh right, yeah, because they don't have the power armor now. They have the worst armor. It looks like, and then a melee team, but they're still going to be
10 models.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, and looking at their like melee weapons, they're maybe power swords, maybe not. Like lots of people are saying they don't look like they might just be normal swords.
Yeah, and then what's a normal sword? Yeah.
Right, and it just seems like that's like a rough wound threshold to be at.
Right. Okay, I'm glad somebody agrees with me. I swear I said this to somebody the other day, and I was like, I don't really know how I would run a 7 model melee team, like 7 wound melee team. I mean, what? That's I'm losing a model every fight.
Or even like an 8 wound melee team if they don't have access to that like 4 or 5 damage threshold.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that's where you really need to be to trade with other melee models. So I'm kind of expecting their stat line to be relatively weak, but if like these other releases and that balance has been nailed, that they're going to have some cool special abilities, right? They have to, otherwise.
So if I had to guess, I think they have to get like Divine Shield, some sort of disgustingly resilient. I think if they don't get that, they're not a melee team. I mean, pure guess. And maybe it won't be a 5 up, maybe it'll be a 6 up disgusting. And then that's not nearly as interesting, but yeah.
It's really interesting how that changes stuff. Like I noticed that when I've played against Yukari a few times, because like for most factions, melee is so mapped out, right? It's just like I know this is how much damage I'm going to do. It's like you have this many wounds left. Okay, I'm gonna charge you. You're dead, right?
Yeah.
It's just how it works. But as soon as there's that feel no pain, it's like I don't know.
Yeah.
Anything could happen, right?
It is.
Once you get those witches with like the feel no pain up and like on a 4 up, you parry instead of doing damage. It's like holy shit! Now I really don't know what's going on.
Yeah, they become remarkably durable. Yeah.
There could be something to that. I think you might be right. If there's some kind of feel no pain equivalent there, that can make them kind of interesting.
That'd be interesting. But then also, what else are they going to do for witches at that point? But anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, I mean, I just thought fun little bit of speculation at the end there. Awesome.
Right.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to say or talk about at the end? Or... anything you want to shout out?
Maybe just like the TTS scene. Like I think we've got like a ton of strong players. If you haven't checked it out, and you're interested in like playing with like really competitive people from all over the world, hop on one of these Discord channels. There's the Command Point one, the Kill Zone. I think people still look for TTS games on your server. Yeah,
and I normally send them to someone else because for whatever reason that's not my thing. But yeah, sure. Yeah.
So yeah, just if it interests you, check that out. Hit me up for a game.
Awesome. Well, there you go. Honestly, everybody in chat, thanks for hanging around. If on the off chance you've just popped in and you've missed it all, this will be up as a Patreon reward on YouTube later. I've deliberately made the Vantage Point very easy to find, even though it's Patreon only. So if you poke around my channel a little bit, you can find where it is, even though it's not like it won't get announced to my subscribers as a release. It's there. You can find it. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. Really great to chat to like an actually good player. Oh wait, hold on. That was meant to insult me, not my other guests. What I mean is, compared to myself, there. No, I meant someone that people generally consider to be, you know, one of the best players out there currently, which is really awesome because, you know, I always approach the game as from I'm a beginner's guide kind of guy, right? I like to funnel people in, and then, you know, help them learn the game, and that's kind of, I view myself more as a teacher than a top tier player, and that's just, you know, so but the only way I can do that and guide people beyond the absolute beginner tips is by taking what other people, better players, say, and kind of absorbing that with my own information and information from other people, and try to kind of mold the different viewpoints together, and then view results and then kind of cross-link it with what the good guys have said. So thank you very much for doing that. I think we had a great chat here. I certainly hope that people didn't get too bored about the Custode bashing. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. It's been great. I'd love to have you on again, and we can chat TAC ops discussions, because I think that's something people haven't really discussed yet. So definitely needs to be done. So thank you very much.
Anytime.
And thank you, chat, and goodbye, everyone.